Welcome back to another episode of Rewind. Tonight we're discussing the art house indie film classic Mississippi Masala. This is a little known but lyrical and probing film by Indian filmmaker Mira Nair. With simplicity and style, but richness in theme, Mississippi Masala takes a love story to new depths, exploring topics like colorism, anti-blackness, and xenophobia between racial groups. Let's get into this discussion. Welcome back to another episode of Rewind. This is our second Rewind, and as you can tell by the title, tonight the film that we are discussing is an indie classic called Mississippi Masala. This is a film written and directed by a woman named Mira Nair. She's actually a really famous filmmaker from out of India, and yeah, this is the first time I've actually watched her work. To my knowledge, I've watched her work unless I've seen something else that I didn't know was directed by her. And honestly, watching this film just from another filmmaker perspective, made me want to watch more of her work because of just some of the themes she put in there, the way she was able to wrap all of those complex themes into this love story, and to sort of like the lyrical quality, like the softness, I think, in her film is really interesting. I think that's something that I don't necessarily even like. That's not my first impulse. So it's nice when people use something like, or they like use softness as a way to sort of tell a narrative. So yeah, let's first start off by overall impressions of the film. What was your overall impression of the film watching it, Caitlin?
I thought it was like, especially for like that era, it was one of your like typical like love movies, I guess you could say,
Mm,
where there's like you're following basically this romance, this not forbidden, but like this romance that maybe should not happen, or like you should be with that person specifically, or whatever. So it was like your typical like '90s film, I think, kind of like um, along the lines of like Jason's Lyric, Poetic Justice, some of
mhm.
those like little love movies kind of thing. So
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that context as far as like Jason's lyrics. But yeah, I could
really,
actually I definitely see that. Yeah, it didn't make me
oh
think of
okay,
Jason's lyric for whatever reason.
yeah.
But
Well, it's kind of like that. Like you're not supposed to be with this person, kind of movie. I mean,
oh
so
yeah, but now that you mention it, yeah, it's absolutely like that. And also, just so you know, this movie was released in 1992. I
hmm
want to say it was at a pretty big film festival, like independent film
hmm
festival. I want to say, but don't quote me on that because I'm really not entirely sure about that. I thought I read that it was at like Sundance or something, but I could be wrong.
like back in the day.
Yeah, like back in the day, like 92,
Hmm.
I
Interesting.
think. Not sure though. I do know the director Mira Nair is like her films in India are pretty big. So like the film that she created, narrative film she created before this one, is called Salam Bombay, and it's like got kind of a cinema verite style, which is, for those who don't know, is like cinema verite is like a French word for like true cinema, and basically what that is like it's kind of taking it's kind of this like raw, real approach to cinema, and like mainly documentaries use that kind of thing of like they'll go and like film on the streets, or kind of follow people around, and it feels very um, authentic. I guess that's the word you could use. It's not as like structured as
hmm
other styles of filmmaking are, and so I think um, that's kind of a style that she was using in that she had been using before. But then once you get into narrative filmmaking, you typically don't use that as much, although you can.
hmm
But yeah, and it's kind of like it's like run and gun filmmaking before run and gun filmmaking like existed. You know what I mean? If you know
Yeah.
what I'm. Um, but yeah, my overall impression of the film is like was it's kind of the same thing as Caitlin. Like it was this like soft love story, but there were so many like complex themes that if you really look into it, dig into it, you can find it there. You know, like I was saying in the introduction, it's not just about the relationship between Demetrius and Mina is actually about the colorism, it's about the anti-blackness, it's about xenophobia, it's about all these other themes we'll get into later, but that the surface is sort of the romance, right? The
Mm-hmm.
what's underneath, and the reason why their racial groups are in such conflict is because of those deeper themes, you know, which is not uncommon even today. So I thought that that was really interesting that they really worked that into the narrative very seamlessly, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just a little quick rundown on actually the synopsis of the film. We hope you've, been able to watch it if you're listening to this episode. But a brief synopsis is that an ethnic Indian family is expelled from Idi Amin's Uganda in 1973 and lives in Mississippi 17 years later. Um, so that's the basic premise. And then you have the daughter of the man who was expelled in the 1970s. She's grown up now, and she falls in love with a black carpenter, um, or carpet cleaner, excuse me. And it's basically about their racial groups kind of infighting within Mississippi to kind of tear them apart, but them trying to obviously blossom this relationship, or like make, have this relationship with each other. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown of just the plot of the film. But now let's get into some of the formal qualities of this project. For me, even as a filmmaker watching this film, I didn't find anything crazy going on formally with this film, as far as the look and how it's structured or anything, right? So it's not an experimental film really in any way. If anything, I think that the look of the film itself is very straightforward and kind of soft, which in a way does lend itself more towards the romantic, intimate, feeling of the storyline. So what I mean by that soft film look is kind of like the soft focus, as well as some of the color choices to me seem to be like very warm, especially when we get to like the Indian wedding, or we get to I'm thinking of like the dance scene where the dance hall is kind of this like low light, very close bodies packed type thing. That's kind of what I think when I think of this film. Um, with just like some of the maybe some of the directing choices, some of the lighting choices, some of the color choices, and it puts you, in my opinion, like right there with the characters, and it's like intentionally intimate, which again makes sense for the narrative because this is a romance, this is a love story, this is about people trying to connect to each other, right? Um, So yeah, I think most of the shots are fairly standard. Nothing like stood out to me on the first watch. Maybe if I watched it again, I would notice like, okay, this kind of shot or that kind of shot or whatever. But everything felt like fairly standard, like a close up when a close up made sense, or a a far away shot when a far, or not far away shot, but a long shot when a long shot made sense. Nothing like jumped out at me as like, oh, this is a direct stylistic choice here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, which again, I think that kind of, in my opinion, that kind of comes from that like it could it could come from just more of like we need to like tell the narrative and let the theme speak for itself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is again, that's another type of style. So you don't have to get crazy with the camera. I do think one scene that stood out a little more formally is when Mina and Demetrius are on the phone with each other, and I don't want to call it phone sex, but it almost feels like that.
Yeah.
'Cause really, they're just kind of, it's just like a split screen, and they're both talking, and like it's very intimate, and they're both in bed. So there's like the idea that if they were in the same room, they would be in bed together, right? But they're in separate places. So I think that actually that framing, that editing style of that split screen, and then putting them like kind of directly next to each other but not in the same room, I think that that creates a lot of sexual tension without actually making these characters have any intercourse at all. You know what I mean? I think
Mm-hmm.
that is that's a really poignant and really like brilliant way to do that, because I mean, it's an artistic, lyrical way to do it too, because so many people just would show the sexual scene, right? But I think in that moment, she wanted to get at the idea of these two people are obviously sexually attracted to each other. They're attracted to each other romantically as well. But they're in two different spaces too. You know what I mean? So I think that was a really poignant way of representing that very clearly on screen. So that's one moment where I think the form of like the camera, where she's putting the camera and how it's displayed on screen, is really sticking out. But everything else seemed fairly like standard to me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I have to watch again to really pick up on even smaller subtleties. But yeah. So yeah, that's what I think mainly for formal qualities. I like that she used Indian music as like a part of the score as well, and traditional clothing. I think that was really that was nice. Or she used kind of the juxtaposition of like traditional Indian clothing with westernized clothing, because we do have that group of men. I don't know if you remember, but the group of dudes, the Indian guys who were like wearing business suits and wearing very Western attire, but
Mm-hmm.
juxtaposed with, and they were kind of like the like fools in the scene. Like they were just kind of like the like rowdy guys who like young guys, like, you know what I mean, kind of going around. But they were wearing very like westernized clothes, kind of, in my opinion, to symbolize that they had taken on like kind of the American mentality, just kind of like schmooze, get by, take easy street if you can type mentality, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was very intentional, because they were really the only Indian people wearing westernized American clothes, while like Mina's mother and father were much more subdued. Or other people were wearing more traditional like Indian clothing. So I thought that was a wardrobe choice, but um, I thought that came across very clearly for their characters. And yeah, otherwise, I don't think nothing else like jumped out at me. If something else jumped out at you as like a formal quality in this film, like let me know, because I would love to definitely like go back, take a look, see if anything else jumped out at me.
Not necessarily.
Is there anything else you like?
I
Nothing
don't like,
jumped out to you formally?
not formally. Like I don't really look when I'm like watching a movie. I'm looking more for like content, like not necessarily the formality of it, because I don't really know the ins and outs to look for.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't have the same background when it comes to film to
Mm-hmm.
like look for those things or dissect those things. Like you are like making me see, like notice things, and I'm like, oh wow, I guess I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
So, I don't really have like formal qualities. Um,
I
as
think you,
far as
when you
the
start
film
making you
itself.
look for it though, because it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
everything you put on screen has some sort of implication,
Significance.
even if it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the most significant thing in the world, but it's like when
Hmm.
you start constructing things from the ground up, you're like, okay, should she be wearing yellow or pink? Should
Yeah,
she be
exactly.
wearing this type of garb? And if they are wearing this, what does that mean for their characters? So those things, when you start making films, that immediately jumps out to you, because you're like, that all of it was a choice. Everything is a choice.
Yeah, and see that's what I'm saying. Like I don't have any formal qualities because I don't see those things as being like necessarily significant. Which I would assume that your normal moviegoer does not perceive those things. It's just like, oh, that's what they had available.
Yeah.
Um, we
Well,
don't
and
really like
that's some
pay
of the
attention to those things.
is to make it so like it feels normal and natural.
Yeah,
Obviously,
exactly.
unless you're aiming to draw attention to what this person is wearing and why they're
Yeah,
wearing something. But I will say people might not notice why it's there, but they will notice if it's out of place. Does that
yeah,
make sense?
exactly.
Like people,
Exactly.
if she was wearing like the Indian traditional family was wearing 1700s clothing, people would be like, now what was that for? They might not.
Exactly. Yeah, no.
If it makes sense, they won't note it. But if it doesn't make
Hmm.
sense, they will note it, if that makes
For
sense.
sure.
You know what I mean?
1000%. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like people will pick up on small things when it's out of place, but they won't
for sure.
necessarily pick up on small things if
Like
it fits
normal.
the narrative, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So on one level it's kind of a good thing. If you don't pick up on something, it's like, well, it made sense, you know? Um so yeah, I think that's kind of what I would say for formal qualities. Like I was saying, I think the themes underneath is really where this film shines the biggest, you know? Um And some of the themes that we noted was definitely colorism. I think that's
Hmm.
actually probably one of the biggest themes throughout the entire film is just colorism within the Indian family and the community. The idea that Mina was like too dark to be with somebody like Henry, who her family like wanted her to marry. They wanted her to marry like a good Indian boy, you know.
But I think
Um,
that came with like status. Like marriage in the Indian culture means way more than what it possibly means in America. So
well, I think she was conflicted. Like she despite her raising in Uganda as a full Indian child was a lot smaller and not as significant, obviously, as her father. You know, like
yeah.
I would say she spent most of her life probably in America and Mississippi, right?
Hmm. Yeah, she
So
was young when she moved over.
mostly American. I mean, that's a confliction for her character. Is like, where does her identity lie? You know?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely think that was like a huge theme too, is like, who am I? You know, like this identity, this theme of like figuring out the who am I, my identity, what do I identify as? Same thing with her dad. Like he was very conflicted with like, okay, yeah, I'm Indian, but I'm Ugandan
Mhm.
as well because he was born and raised there. So he
Mhm.
felt entitled to be able to stay there because he had been born and raised there. But um, that's not his. Um,
It's like ethnic.
I mean, that's just, yeah, that's not his ethnicity. So, but like, who are you to tell somebody you're not, maybe African because you lived there your whole life? That's all you know?
Exactly. Yeah, it's
So,
so interesting. It's like it does raise that question of where does identity lie? Is it a racial? Is it an ethnic? Is it a
hmm,
national? Like,
yeah.
and what happens when those things are in conflict for someone like um, Jay, Mina's
Hmm.
dad, who is ethnically and racially Indian,
Hmm.
but is raised in Uganda, so identifies even more probably with that nationality than
Yeah.
with his own, ethnic and racial group.
Hmm.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like I get the feeling he would feel out of place if he was in Bombay, in India.
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. I don't think they. Yeah, I think Amina says in the movie too, like they've never been to India, so like they don't know what it's like to be there.
Yeah,
They just
they
don't
were,
identify with it.
but that's what I find interesting too. Is like then they get to America where they are extra out of. I don't want to say out of place, but they're really not with their ethnic group, right? They're not with their national
Hmm.
group or their ethnic group, so they're in America.
Hmm.
And then you have someone like Demetrius, who historically Black Americans have been in the same position that an Indian family, that Mina's family is in. They're not their ethnic group, your national group that you belong to is not rooted in America, nor is like your ethnic group or your racial group is not rooted in American soil. But this is where you
Hmm.
have found yourself through
Yeah.
historical events. Because really,
Hmm.
Demetrius's family, yes, Mississippi is like where they are residing now, but like historically, where would he have racially? His group of people would not have been in the Americas at all. They would have been in Africa.
Exactly. Yeah, and I
So
think that kind of like it's like a full circle for Mina in
yeah,
a sense.
it's interesting, definitely, because I mean, this is like we were saying, it's so subtle on the surface, but these themes are like actually quite complex. I mean, identity and nationality, ethnicity, those are things
Hmm.
people have to negotiate throughout their entire lives, and then it comes together in this love story where we see Mina dealing with her own identity, and then Demetrius, who represents a whole other racial group living in America, who's also kind of um, the other kind of an outcast, misplaced. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
part of a diaspora. That's that's what I think. I think this is kind of a diasporatic film. Do you know what diaspora means?
No.
Okay, so diaspora is basically referencing, they usually use it in African cultures to explain the peoples or the different groups of Africans and Black people that are
Mm.
spread across the globe for various reasons, historical reasons. Slavery would be a major one, but like if you talk about the African diaspora, you talk about Africans who end up in London, and then that ethnic group that evolves there. Same thing with African
Mm-hmm.
Americans, and same things with like Africans in the Caribbean or in Latino countries, or not
Mm-hmm.
Latino, excuse me, South American countries. The diaspora is talking about that spread out of different
Mm.
racial groups. So
Got it.
when you so like Mina's family would be kind of diasporatic for the Indian community because her peoples or the Indian people ended up in Uganda because they were brought there to work, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
immediately creates a spread out of their a spread away from their homeland. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So and diaspora is a kind of a big word, but that's where there's a lot of literature surrounding that, like African diaspora, and I'm sure like the Indian diaspora, and even like everything is so like blended now. Like every culture has a diaspora pretty much, but
Yeah.
but that's kind of when I look at these two communities, I'm like this is like conflict of the diaspora as well. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you Google the term diaspora, you'll see what I'm talking about. They probably explain it a lot better than me, but that's kind of in simple terms what diaspora means. So if you hear that term, that's kind of, it means like a kind of spread out or almost like a
Got it.
misplacing away from the homeland of a racial group
Mm-hmm.
around the world. You know,
Yeah. Okay.
so yeah, and I just think this was just really nice to bring attention to the fact that Black people aren't the only ones who exist in a diaspora, because that's what we tend to think of as like Black people are the only ones who's like spread out, right? But the Indian community has, I'm sure, like the Latino community definitely has. So it's just pretty interesting. You still there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that this film can be looked at in that way as well. Like you could look at it from a racial, ethnic identity perspective. You could look at it from a diaspora perspective, and then you get into more specifics like something like colorism. So, what do you think about the colorism, just either within the Indian community, but also uh, between the Black community and the Indian community?
I think that, so we talked about Mina, how she was considered too dark, especially in reference of like who she could date.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when those were the they they had this idea of colorism within the Indian community, and they pretty much mirrored the spectrum that you would see in the African American community. But it was like the African Americans were like still beneath them. It's like I'm Indian, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that while there was colorism within each of the communities, it was also this like uh, this divide between ethnicities, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which
so
is
that was
it's interesting. You see that the Indian community adopts sort of the white idea of
yeah.
what this is.
It's like they're closer to whiteness, so it's like I'm okay, even
Yeah,
though they're not accepted either.
that's also another term for you. That's what anti-blackness is. Is
Mm-hmm.
basically adopting the idea or upholding the idea that anything black, the closer you are to blackness, the like more inferior you become. So
Mm-hmm.
different groups around the world adopt that. That's not just an American idea. Other countries practice that, as we see in this film. Even in 1992, Mina was on the darker side for an Indian, so that was seen as negative. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing like in I know like in Chinese communities, the like more tan you are, that is like seen as bad. That's a form of anti-blackness. Is this darkness being closer to black is seen as bad across the board for any racial ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's why people say like anti-blackness is spread across the globe. It's not just an American thing. It's not just a European thing. Anti-blackness is seen as the closer you are to blackness, that's always seen as bad. Which again, what puts black people, people of color, in this very, very you become the other in every single corner of the globe aside from your own homeland. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yep. I think that played like a really big. That was a huge theme in this movie. Like it was from start to beginning. I think also too like I in the beginning. So Jay, which is the dad, he is living in Uganda, and it was he kind of had like this like chip on his shoulder, in my personal opinion, which I don't know if it was strictly because he was Indian and he, had this idea that he was superior because of his closeness to whiteness. Or if it was maybe his success in Uganda. But it was like fine and dandy while he was over there in Uganda. But when he came to the States, it's like, oh no, black men. Which I wonder if that's because of his experience with blackness and being rejected, maybe. So he like took that and used it against African Americans in Mississippi. But I mean, he was fine and dandy as long as he had his quote unquote brothers in Uganda. But he comes to the States and he's like, don't hang out with black people to his daughter. Like, what?
yeah.
So
I wonder if it's because they see American blackness and Ugandan blackness as different types.
maybe.
Because I do think the perception of black Americans is always that black Americans are more ignorant or somehow, or they're like
Yeah.
not like really black, or they're sort of like the like I hate to say just ignorant, but like the other of the other, like
Yeah. The
they're
bottom of the
like
totem
more
pole,
there's more respect.
legitimately.
Yeah, I think they consider it more respectful like an African black person than to be an African American. Which again is no fault of African Americans' own because who was brought here, you know what I mean? Anyway, but I think that might have played a part in it too.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I don't know. I just like it's for me watching the movie. Colorism became a thing after he moved from Uganda, right? Specifically for Jay, which it makes me wonder if it really is the idea of colorism or just his experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean I think that's a good probing question because I don't know if the film really answers that. I don't think it does actually. Like we
No.
just know that he does love his Ugandan brothers and they're
Yeah.
black people in America. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't think it's like he's kind of like I guess it's sort of hypocritical on his part because like he doesn't want her with a black American, but he's like cool with Ugandan. And maybe it's because he's like not marrying his daughter off. Like, you know how it is like we're fine as long as you like don't marry into our family or don't come close. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which I mean, I wonder. Like, I don't know the Ugandan tradition. Like, do they marry? I know. I think they like marry their daughters off, kind of thing. They don't really. I don't know if they have much choice in the matter, or if it's for status or whatever. I don't know if it's the same premise, but I think it is the same underlying respect for the culture and what your parents have to say when it comes to who you marry. Versus in this situation with Mina and Henry, it was just like I'm doing what makes me happy.
Yeah.
Which to me
Well,
is fair because I'm an American.
Demetrius, not Henry.
It's not Henry, sorry, Demetrius.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she wants to be in this relationship with Demetrius, and but her parents, I feel like, want her to be with Henry. That's
Yeah. Because
so
Henry up with
Henry's
status.
an Indian, yeah. Demetrius an African American.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really complex, I think. Like, and there's really no answer to it. Obviously, even for Mina and Demetrius, they didn't really have an answer to it. They just did what felt good. you know, which I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But I mean, Mina's just very removed from that tradition and like that.
Yeah, I would say Mina's almost more Western than anybody in the film.
100%.
She's very much
100%.
agency. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, her parents were definitely holding on to that, which is odd to me because it's like they're holding on to this Indian tradition that they didn't necessarily follow either. You know what I mean? Though they were
Mm,
Indian, they lived in Uganda. So it's like this Indian culture is also very new to Mina too, which in
mm,
my personal opinion could be why she just decided I'm just going to have my own way of doing things because it's confusing for a child. Before they came to America, they lived in United Kingdom. So
mm.
the kid was just thrown into different cultural situations, and that can make a child wonder, who am I?
Yeah,
And then rebel and just do whatever they want.
exactly. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think also something that stood out to me is how the black community exoticized Mina. At least the
Yeah.
black men, anyways. We didn't really see how black women interacted. But like we saw Demetrius's friend. I forgot what his character name is. I know the actor's name is Charles Dutton Jr., who's actually like kind of like famous from back in the day. But he they were all like, "Yeah, you got the Indian girl," ha, 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 you know how like dudes talk, and I just like it was like
That's
it
how
was
they
kind of
talk.
funny because I was like,
Mm.
when that's how they talk, they're like, ha, ha, "Look at you know, cackle, cackle, laugh, laugh," type thing. So, so yeah, they were just like exoticizing that he like got with Mina, or that Mina was interested in him, you know,
Yeah, I
and
don't
they
think
kind
he
of
necessarily cared. It was more of like people around him.
yeah, I don't think Demetrius cared. Um, and but I think it was like the people around him who made it like apparent that she was the exotic other, you know,
Hmm. And she was desirable because she was the
because
exotic
she
other.
was exotic other, and I think they kind of, which is a form of reducing people. Actually, exoticizing is a form of reducing. It's not really flattering, but
Yeah. I think back then they didn't see it as a.
I don't think so. But they do it. They did
It
it.
was. It
Yeah,
was and is.
yeah. It's like, I mean, honestly, I think it's the same reason why like now like white women are seen as like the prize, or you know what I mean, as
Hmm.
like that idea of like anything but blackness is better, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, lame, but but because they had another black woman there who was Demetrius's original love interest,
Hmm.
and I forgot what her name is. I want to say it's like Rachel or something with an R, or Robin.
Yeah. I
But
don't remember.
but they had her there, and she showed up and everything, and I mean, I guess they were kind of like I don't think they necessarily put her down because she was black or she was darker skinned.
Hmm.
They were just like, she's like the vixen. She's just like, she turned Demetrius down. She's not trying to get with Demetrius, and saw her as kind of a negative thing, you know.
Yeah.
But
That's fair.
when, I mean, she could have turned him down because, like, not necessarily because he's black. Like, he could have been a bum. You don't know. Not that I
Seriously.
necessarily think
But I
Demetrius
don't. I mean, he
wasn't,
doesn't really strike me as a bum, but
not like a
I do
bum, but
think.
like, there's a million reasons somebody would turn somebody down, not just because they're black or not, you know.
I mean, but that does happen too. So.
I mean, it does happen. I don't know. Her character, we didn't get in too much into her character. She was basically a plot point, in my opinion. She just kind of served
Yeah,
the
no,
purpose of
for
being
sure. And she was there for like
a
5 seconds.
girl.
So.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think another interesting theme is we kind of talked about how the community see the other.
Hmm.
But something else I thought was interesting is the idea of like deflowering, or when it comes to women. And if for those who don't know, that means that basically is the idea of like taking someone's virginity, or taking somebody's like um just I guess sleeping with somebody, but like being somebody's first time, right? Or right, like
Hmm.
Mina was. that was her first relationship, her first everything. So the idea of women like becoming spoiled goods somehow after being with certain men, I think that was a subtle theme um, in this film, just in relationship to what we were saying about colorism and seeing how the
Mm-hmm.
other. I think they were really concerned with the fact that she like is now, because she's with Demetrius, she's like no longer like pristine and prime for a good Indian guy, you know?
Yeah, she like spoiled good now.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because I mean that gets more into just kind of gender and sexism or whatever, but I do think that that gave their family a certain level of anxiety. They're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're doing this because now you're no longer available." You know?
Mm-hmm. What I wonder, like, I feel like that was more pushed by her parents than it was necessarily Mina. Mina didn't really care. I feel like Mina was a well-rounded individual. She knew she was doing. She knew she
Hmm.
was genuinely interested in Demetrius. Because if that's the case, then she would have been like doing any and everything with, for example, Henry. Because she met Henry, or she was out with Henry when she met Demetrius, kind of,
Hmm.
sort of. Um, and so I think it's her parents were more pushing that narrative than Mina really cared. So,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
didn't. She knew what she was doing. She was 24, and she like states it at the end of the movie. She's like, "I'm 24. I'm grown. Like I basically she needs to be able to make her own decisions and do what makes her happy, not live for her parents' wishes and dreams."
Hmm. Agreed. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think Mina to me again is the character who's the most Western and has the most asserts her agency the most, really, out of
Yeah.
anybody. And who's like, "This is the life I'm going to live. I'm going to like this. I'm going to do this," and she succeeds. I mean, she does what she wants to do at the end of the day.
Oh yeah. She does. She finds a way.
She finds a way to do what she wants to do, and I mean, really, all her parents can complain, but like that's it, you know. Um,
Yep.
but I just think it's interesting that the traditional family still has that idea of like you're spoiled if you do this sort of thing, and that becomes a main source of tension of why they really don't even want her to get with somebody like Demetrius because they don't want her spoiled even by an Indian person, but certainly not by a black person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think
I
that's
think too.
something
Like,
that all kinds of
didn't the
communities.
parents have an arranged marriage?
Yeah, I think they stated that the parents had an arranged marriage and that they learned to like love each other over the years or something.
Yeah, I think. I mean, also to the narrative that well, it worked for me, so it should work for you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But everybody's different, so I mean, plus they live in a completely different community with a different set of individuals. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm realizing now that this film is also a lot about tradition versus uh, progress, I guess, or
yeah,
like kind of that. Do we stick with what's tradition and what it should be, whatever should be done according to the old ways, versus do we figure out a new way to live in a way that works for us? You
yeah.
know?
I think also too the contrast between tradition and the contrast between tradition and the adapting to, I guess, like maybe the traditions of the new community that you're living in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like how the tradition of the American culture is going versus, for example, for these individuals, the Indian community, um, vastly different. But Mina's like, no, I'm adapting to the world that I'm living in and the people that I'm around that I have to survive with, right? Versus the parents are like holding on to any little hope of maintaining this Indian tradition that I mean personally, I don't think they're fully tied to. It's just because they're supposed to, and that's the community that they're currently living in Mississippi.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely that question of assimilation. Like,
Yeah,
do we, assimilate to the culture that is that we are living in, that we're existing in, or do we still hold on to our tradition? And I think even
exactly.
them living in that motel and trying to stick with only an Indian community, I think that's their way of really trying to hold on to their tradition.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And we see that even in, cities today, like entire sections of city will be dedicated to a certain ethnic group. And the
Mm-hmm.
people there really try their absolute best to hold on to the tradition, even though they're in a new land, or they're like in a new place that is not their homeland,
Yeah. Yeah, no, you see that all the time.
Yeah.
And we both live in big cities, so you see all the time.
Yeah, it's like why one part of a city is Chinatown versus like,
Yeah.
Chinatown or whatever. It's like those communities are named after them trying to hold on to what they know, their
Yeah.
tradition, and actually trying to actively not assimilate.
For sure. Yeah. Same thing here. They have like little areas, like certain parts, north, south, east, west kind of thing. Every part is known for being a specific type of community.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about like the idea of this? I guess like the age gap between Mina and Demetrius.
I kind of thought it was slightly concerning, only
Really?
because, yeah, because I was like, Demetrius had to be in his 30s, right?
Maybe late
I don't
20s.
think I felt maybe because I just know Denzel at the time would have been probably in his 30s, if not closer to 40s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, something about it was like halfway concerning. Like it gave me this little sliver of concern only because I saw myself as like Mina's age, and I would have been like, not that I feel like he was really trying to take advantage of her, but I feel like I don't know. It's always concerning me when the guy is significantly older than the woman. That's just me.
Really?
Yeah, it's
So
always
here's the
concerning.
thing. I think that this is the reason why it's not concerning to me. It's because Mina was pretty mature, and I don't think she would have done good with anybody that was not mature. So I think she needed someone like Demetrius who was going to challenge her, who was going to show her new things because she was already curious and trying to do those things. And so it was really just like the icing on the cake to allow her to be more adventurous, to be more open to new things, to try new things, try, um, you know, experiencing things with different cultures and whatnot. So I don't think she would
Yeah,
have done good with someone like, for example, Henry, who was the Indian individual that was interested in her because he was like following the status quo. She would have been bored.
yeah.
So I think it depends on the person.
I
If
think
Mia
it's
was more
concerning is
mature, I would have said no.
yeah. Well, okay. I guess what's concerning is the experience level. So this is like Mina's first like real relationship. This is her first like, from what we understand, this is like her first like kind of forbidden romance type thing. Really, probably her first
Mm-hmm.
romance, serious romance, anyways, in the first place. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but Demetrius already had a relationship, and we see the lady that he had a relationship with, and he was like with her in a serious way. Like I think didn't they say he was like intending to marry her?
I think so.
Yeah, like he had proposed or something. He was seriously trying to like move his life in that direction. And so I don't want Mina to be the like young rebound because I do feel like at least in American culture or male culture, that is like what they do is like the woman who rejects them, the woman closer to the age who rejects them, they just get with somebody younger and more impressionable, somebody not as experienced, not necessarily impressionable, but somebody not as experienced, and then they become that person's like whole scope of understanding what relationships are. And so I'm a little like on that just because of his experience level versus Mina's experience level.
Well, we don't really know Mina's experience level because we meet Mina at 24, right? The only reason why
Yeah.
we know Demetrius's experience level is because we meet his ex, and they have an
Yeah.
interaction. Her, Mina, and Demetrius, right? So we really
Mhm.
don't know Mina's. So I mean, that's why I'm like, who am I to judge? You know what I mean? Um, we just don't get to see that side of her. Outside of we get to see her interaction with Henry, um, but she didn't really feel Henry like that. It was like, oh, let's go hang out, let's have a good time.
Mm.
So, but I personally, um, to me, there's nothing like a mature woman having to settle for an immature man. Like that is
Oh
like,
no, Mina should never have settled. We're not saying
I mean,
that.
yeah, but I mean, if she finds someone like Demetrius, which Demetrius seemed to be pretty respectful, like he was never
No,
like,
I don't think he
huh?
was. I'm not saying he was like totally weird. I'm just saying the optics. If we look at this on paper and experience level, it can so happen. I'm just saying in less immature worlds, it does happen where there's this older guy trying to rebound, but just gets like any impressionable young woman have some sort of
Yeah, but I would say
rebound.
they're probably a less than a 10 year age gap.
Yeah, I wouldn't say more than 10
Like
years.
this is not like a 6 year old going for a 21-year-old. Like this is less than 10 years easily. So I think there is a little bit, and Mina's 24. Like Mina's around our age, and so I feel like at 24 you can make a sound decision for yourself. And if you don't make a sound decision for yourself, then you know the repercussions of your actions, or you have to deal with them.
I know, I'm just saying, but 24 also, I guess there's like a girlishness and an inexperience level to Mina that I keep going back to and thinking like she just hasn't experienced this. So even if you are
Yeah.
able to make a right and wrong decision and you have the faculties to do that, that doesn't mean you have the experience to know what you should or shouldn't do. You and I both know, having been 24, 25, you can know, you can prepare yourself and know everything about the world. We're sound minded individuals, we're educated individuals. That doesn't mean we know what to do every time we're in a new experience type situation, especially relationships.
So how else is she gonna learn?
I mean, I'm not saying she did it wrong. And I actually think this was a better option. I'm just saying, like, when I think about it, I think some people, not necessarily Demetrius, actually, but some people do prey on inexperience when it
Oh,
comes
for
to
sure.
age.
Yeah.
There are people
Yeah,
who
but
do
that's what
that.
I'm saying. Like, I think in this particular case only, because I'm not speaking for the masses here, I'm not speaking to the creeps who try to pry
Mm-hmm.
on young women. This worked because Demetrius, first of all, was not interested in her just because of, first of all, her exotic look. Right? He was not interested in her because of her age. He didn't really care. And the same thing goes for her. It was just like she had a genuine connection with this person. Right? So that's what I mean by there's a level of maturity in both individuals that makes this work, um,
Yeah. I
versus an
also feel like
individual.
another thing too, I do think just the actor Denzel does make it a little bit better. I'm not gonna lie. Like I do feel like
Yeah,
aesthetically is less creepy. You know what I mean?
I agree,
Like
but I think
if
also
you have
too,
been
like
Joe Snow,
Denzel
I'd have been
looks
like, great.
older.
What'd
I
you
think
say?
Denzel looks older though, so I mean, this individual could have been in their 20s too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, they do talk about him being young, and him being, like having the option to go and better himself, but he ends up staying home to help his dad and stuff like that. So I don't think he's too old. Um,
No, I think I'm just saying I could see him being in his 30s. That's all I'm saying. Early 30s. And her being in
Really, I
her,
see him being in like his late 20s.
no, I see him being in his early 30s. It could be because I see Denzel, the actor, as probably being in his 30s at that
And that's what
time.
I was gonna say. Like Denzel, it looks older, so it's hard to like you can't gauge how old
Yeah.
the
I got
character
caught
is
up on
based off
the
Denzel's look.
actor. I think I got caught up in Denzel and was like,
Yeah,
do I really see this working?
yeah. Like, but I mean, you have to separate Denzel from the character because
Yeah, you're right.
like optically, I mean, you'd be like, like he could be her dad. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but that's what I'm
But
saying. Then at that point, then I'm like, okay, so would I have seen this differently if it had been another actor's body in that position? Like somebody who legitimately was in there was 28, 29, not Denzel, who's,
hmm,
35, pushing 40.
yeah. Well, that could be one of the formal qualities. They maybe weren't as strategic on picking an individual that
Yeah.
fit the look.
'Cause I know there's so many, like, you honestly, you could have got the guy from Jason's Lyric.
Yeah.
Or you could have
Yeah.
got, I'm trying to think of other black actors who would have been in that age range at the time, um, who were pretty big. Um, who else? Well, I guess Denzel was probably the biggest one at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
that's they also probably put him in there because he has a lot of star power.
Yeah.
No, but who else were black actors at that time who would have really fit that age range?
Mm. See, I feel like in that era, everybody looked kind of old. No
Yeah,
offense.
you're right. I think now our generation tends to look more young,
Like different.
youthful, despite
Yeah.
being relatively the same age.
Yeah.
Than I think they did. Like to me they look more like they like purposely looked older.
Yeah. Yeah.
Despite being
Even
our
the
age. Like they were
hairstyles
like
and stuff like
25
that.
looking
It's just,
30, 40, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay, so maybe I mean the age gap isn't super, super concerning. I guess because again I was associating it kind of heavily with Denzel. I was like, because I feel like the way Denzel looked in the movie, he looked like he could have already been married with 2 kids.
That's what I'm saying. He could have been her dad, seriously.
Yeah. But,
Which I know he
you
wasn't
know,
that old in real life.
no, because at the time, I don't think Denzel would have been even probably 40 at that time. In
Definitely not.
1992, he probably would have been 30s.
Maybe.
But I do also feel like Denzel has an older demeanor too. Like
Mm-hmm.
his demeanor is much more like wise and like established. To me, he never gave off like, I don't know, young and immature vibes. Like I don't think he's ever really played young, immature characters.
Facts. Bruh, no, in 1992, he was 38.
Oh dang! Oh shoot! When was Denzel born then?
He was born in 1954.
Oh snap! So he was her dad.
Yeah. Well, dang. No, but that makes sense, though. Like, wow, you had that.
That thought,
That,
yeah, because that really stood out to me. I was like, the age gap.
yeah. They could have, like,
I
I
mean,
agree with you. They
he
could have been a
looked
little
good. I
bit
mean, he looked
more
good to be
strategic.
38.
Bro, he's freaking 67 right now. That man look good.
No, he looked good to be 38 at that time.
No, I'm talking about
Like,
now. He's 67. He looks good.
yeah. No, he still looks. He
Yeah,
does still look good.
I'm here for it. Mm-hmm.
That's why. That's why it felt a little creepy to me. You know, that was a casting decision because the
Yeah.
actress looked 24, 22. You know what I mean? Really young and spry. I think
Oh,
not
God.
that Denzel wasn't, but like 38, you start getting into okay, mom dad range.
Yeah, but I wonder if it was like a strategic move, as in like Denzel was pretty big then, so it's like let's bring in some notoriety here,
Yeah,
get
that's what I'm saying.
some
It is a
good,
star move, which is
Yeah,
helpful for film because like Denzel's in it. Okay, let me watch. You know, you got the black community there at least.
right.
So yeah, maybe because if we like looking at it, he's 38, she's 24. In normal life, that would be creep
Concerning. Yeah,
concerning. I know my experience with 38-year-olds and 38, 40-year-olds at, even my age is always concerning.
honestly, like I'm that type of person where like I would date somebody older. I cannot date someone like especially a male my age. Never, can't do it.
Oh no, males our age are absolute mess
Yeah,
most of the time.
I could not do that. I could
But
not.
the ones older, to me, what I find is if you are that much older and you're genuinely attracted to somebody that much younger, you're as mature, as immature as the 20-something-year-old males too.
Well, I'm
So
talking about maybe a max a 10-year age gap, like just someone that's more
I don't
like
know.
minded.
There's a reason why they're that old and still trying to go after somebody 20 years younger than them because that's
You
where they
think
see
10
themselves.
years?
Yeah, a lot of them they see themselves in that same age range.
I don't know. I mean, me personally, like I'm never gonna like go and seek out somebody, but like if I notice like you're immature and like your age matches to that, because there's some, I'm sure there's some 24-year-old men that, or 25-year-old whatever, um, who are mature. It's just like your actions have to be back in your age, and if it's not, then I gotta go.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, to me, it's worse. I can almost understand somebody 24 being deeply immature, or 21 being deeply
I
immature.
can't. That's not an excuse.
Somebody 38 being deeply immature, 40, 45,
Yeah.
you missed the ball, buddy. And I'm just saying, a lot of times they'll go after somebody significantly younger because that's the like mentality that they are on.
I mean, in some cases, sure, but regardless of if you're, 48 or if you're 28, if you're on that level of immaturity, then you just gotta go. Period.
That's my experience. I'm gonna just say my experience with the older 30-something-year-old dudes has always been they haven't been quite there. They're not like the silver fox that they think they are. You know what I'm saying?
That's not my experience, but
Well, yeah. Well, I'll just say I speak from my experience. I'm not going to speak for everybody else's because I'm sure there are 38-year-olds who are mature and are with 24-year-olds, and all of that is beautiful and lovely.
mm-hmm.
I'm just saying my personal with the 38-year-olds is, why am I more mature than you and I'm 24? Like, why are you behaving like a 2-year-old?
You use, I mean, okay, let's be honest. First of all, that was in a situation that was unwarranted. I'm talking about in a like-minded situation where you're both are like
Yeah.
somewhat interested. It's very different than when it's like one way and you're like not feeling that. So
Okay.
that's what I mean by like, if it's,
I'm just observing their behavior too, though. Not
but that's what I'm
even.
saying. If you're observing their behavior, but there's a genuine like, it's very different from when there's a disdain.
It wasn't just straight up disdain. It was just observing, watching their behavior too, before there was any mention of anything. And I noted I was like, why does this group of people behave like children?
I guess that's fair.
That's all I'm saying. Is like, I think more than we sometimes like to give credit for is like, they can be in that age range and still behave very immaturely.
I mean, any age range. It doesn't
Yeah.
negate anybody from being immature. But in my experience, the older, usually the more. And I mean, first of all, like in your situation, these are people that you wouldn't even surround yourself with outside of work, right? I surrounded myself around people after communicating with them for an extensive period of time, that were more like-minded. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? That's what I mean
Yeah.
by like,
I mean,
there's
I
a
can see
level of
that.
like
I can see
interest.
if you're like-minded and you're moving in the same like
Yeah.
arena. And like you
Versus
said,
your situation was unwarranted all the way around.
yeah, it was like trapped because of work.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And so you like, even if I didn't want to observe the behavior, which I didn't really want to, I had to because I was like at the cubicle. You know what I mean? So it was like you had to put up with certain behaviors because that's the way that they behave. You know what I mean? You can't like teach someone how to be better, especially when they're, they are that old and they do have children and families and all this stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I agree with you. It's the type of person, and I met older people who are more mature and like aren't like, immature, but unfortunately, the bad apples do spoil the bunch in some cases. But okay, sorry, we really got off topic there. The age gap for Demetrius, I think we settled on the fact that because Denzel, the actor himself, was actually 38 at the time, that's what made him feel older.
Yeah.
Versus,
which I tried to look at like the character's age, and it didn't have anything. So
yeah. But versus the character age, if the character's age was closer to Mina's age, like 29, then it would have felt more like, because on some level, I hate to say it, it felt like she was like with her uncle, you know?
Yeah,
And like, don't get me
good.
wrong, Denzel was still good looking at the time. He still
In
had
his
his charms
prime.
about him. And, was Denzel, I mean, he was pretty famous by that time, right? I think he
Mm-hmm.
had already done like maybe not Training Day yet, but like he had done his stuff. So Denzel was already pretty much on his way. If he wasn't already a household name, he was on his way, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, he feels more like Uncle, and so I think that's what creeps me out a little bit. It's just the casting decision there.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to seen a younger black man in that role. Okay, I got it. The guy who was Denise's husband in the Cosby Show.
Mm. Mm-mm. He
No,
looks older to me too.
but in 1992, you got to think 1992.
I mean, he looks like he's. I guess. I guess that's better than. Yeah, I guess that's better than Denzel, maybe.
He looks sort of like Denzel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to really think of other black actors at the time. I mean, I feel like it was pretty much Denzel. Like he had his reign in the 90s. Yeah, I think that guy would have been a better option, or the guy from Jason's Lyric.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm blanking on 90s black actors. I'm sure if I saw a film, I'd be like, oh yeah, of course, so and so would be great for that.
I think Tupac would have been a good option.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Tupac would have been a good option because he fits that kind of like lowbrow. I don't say lowbrow, but like he fits that
Yeah,
kind of like, bad boy image that I think the
for
family
sure.
was really trying to like go for. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying, or the family, Mina's family was like, that's the view they had of black man, you know? So I think if you had somebody like Tupac in there who would have been able to really kind of, lend himself to that image,
Yeah.
it could have made a stronger point when he was like a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just, hypothetically casting here. Kind of like poetic
Doing their
justice.
not what it's like 20 years later.
20 years later, hypothetical casting. Well, we don't know what their casting process was like, so they might have tried to get to Tupac. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I was he was alive then, so
Yeah, he would have been alive in 92. Not 96, though, but,
mm-hmm. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
That was like right after you were born, or was it right before?
It was
Before.
like a couple months before we were born.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to say like 2 months before we were born. But yeah, so that was a good discussion. I mean, I know it's kind of a long discussion on age gaps, but I think we did come to a conclusion that the reason why I was halfway slightly a little bit creeped out is because Denzel was giving me uncle at the time, not boyfriend material.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Well, some of the other things we want to talk about, like in relationship to this film, is like character types, character archetypes. Um, so one of the character archetypes that we identified for Mina was just how, like we were saying earlier, how she really identifies as kind of a Western like young woman. She's American Indian, but she really sees herself like heavy on the American, I think. You know what I mean? Like she
Mm-hmm.
wants to do the things that kind of all the American girls do, like date, have fun, um, experience life, have love, sort of thing. Typical 24-year
Yeah.
old young lady things. And she really is the main character, I think, who really pushes against tradition in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And then, on the
Yeah.
other hand, you have Demetrius, who becomes her love interest, who he kind of has a type A family. He's family oriented. He's like a good guy. He's more by the books. And we see that when we see his brother. His brother is kind of like fooling around, doing whatever, lollygagging through life, you know. Um, but Demetrius owns his own carpet cleaning company, gets steady business, owns his own truck, kind of thing. You know, is making
Yeah.
his way. He's blue collar, but he's making his way for himself. You see him progressing in the future to even more better, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that honestly, that dynamic kind of sets up as like Romeo and Juliet. This movie has a Romeo and Juliet vibe to it to me. Obviously, their families aren't necessarily feuding, but they are from different ethnic groups, which kind of clash in the movie. That's like the main source of conflict. So I think it's sort of like the other is who you end up wanting to connect with, you know. And I think that this
Yeah.
film really plays on that. That's a main source of tension, you know. Same thing with Romeo and Juliet is the other family, like of all the people you could, you know, link up with, it's the people we like hate the most in Romeo and Juliet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep.
Very true.
But do you think of any other character types or archetypes that were really present that stood out to you?
I noticed Mina's dad was pretty problematic in my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
He was just kind of like stuck in his own like rut, and he was like, to me, he was like trying to drag everybody down into that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because he was just like stuck on getting kicked out of Uganda, and he was stuck on that for years and years and years and years and years. And
Mm-hmm.
he ended up going to Uganda at the end of the movie, and sending his wife a letter back saying that she's where home is at, kind of thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like he even did the same thing with his child. He was willing to jeopardize that relationship in order to, I guess, fulfill his fantasy of claiming Uganda as his, which to me is like an ego thing, a male ego thing. Even when it comes to giving his daughter off to an Indian man who may have status, who may have this, that, and the other. It was more of an ego thing. So I consider her dad to be problematic. He was very just like worried about his own problems, stuck in his own ways. He didn't even work. His wife worked because he was trying to write letters to Uganda. Like, come on, my friend, come on.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta. I understand you're going through some things, and it's okay to go through those things, but that cannot be your end all, be all for 20 years.
Yeah.
Just can't. So
He definitely giving like obsessed mad scientist vibes.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like slightly, you know, because it was just like he continued to write these letters, you know, over a
For 20
decade.
years, like that's what he did for 20 years. Like, ugh.
Yeah. Continued to write these letters, continued to like try to fight the good fight. And I think it separated. It caused a real rift with his relationship with Mina
Mm-hmm.
because I think it keeps him from being able to really fully delve into being her father, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. He was there, but he wasn't there. Just
Yeah.
because he was so concerned about what was going on in Uganda and the hurt that he experienced, that it made him a non-present parent when he had the opportunity to be present. And so I think
Exactly.
Mina also noticed that too. And she's just kind of like, why are you putting everything into this? Like, there's so many
Mm-hmm.
other things that you could be focusing on. And then when she gets, finds this love interest, now you want to suddenly be interested in me and what I have going on. Like, no, should have thought about that 20 years ago. Even to the point where, she's in this relationship. And he's like, no, we're moving to Uganda. Like, what? No.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that they intended to make his character appear that way and they succeeded in that for sure. Um his kind of obsession is what really it isolates him from his family and from his community, you know. Because even the other
he didn't care.
yeah, he didn't care. Like the other people in the community were like, all you do is sit around and write these letters that are never gonna get addressed. I don't know what's wrong with you, you know what I mean? And on one level, like they're right too, because it's like allowing something like that to take up so much of your time, you know, just to when he goes back, he's like, I think he realizes like the 20 years writing these letters and kind of being obsessed with like getting his property back, getting his stuff back. It was like, and for what? The country had changed so much by the time he got back, you know, that it really wasn't
Yeah,
home anymore for him.
exactly. And he, I mean, he didn't feel, you can kind of see he looks kind of lost and out of place there. But I mean, so much has happened in Uganda when he went back in that 20
Hmm.
year span. So it was like, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think home
okay.
is where you take it. I think that was what that moment meant. It was like home is where you take it, where your family is, where the things that are most important to you are, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a specific place.
Yeah. But it took him 20 years to get that, bro. Like, oh my
Mm,
God. Your child, like, if, in 20 years, because Mina was about 20, I think she was like 24 in the movie. Um,
mm,
your child was 4
mm-hmm,
when y'all moved. Like, buddy, you missed a huge part of her life.
mm-hmm.
Writing
Yeah,
letters.
that's your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even like his wife, like he wasn't even present for her because like she experienced her own grief from losing everything they had in Uganda too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but she then took on all that burden and on top of providing for him, which is another problem. Um, I don't necessarily think that men have to be like the quote unquote provider of the home, but you have to contribute something. We're not living here for free, buddy. Even the hotel people, the owners, they got tired of him. They're like, you gotta go. He's not gonna cut it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad he eventually had that revelation of like at the end of the film that his letter writing, like so much has changed that it's like it's not even the home he had imagined in his head, you know?
Hmm.
I'm glad that that plot point came full circle because, you know, most of the film was about Mina and Demetrius, but they really rounded out that uh, arc with Jay's character, you know?
Hmm.
So, and I think his character was like a warning, like, don't become obsessed because, again, home is where you take it, home is where your family is, home can be anywhere, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
So, yeah. Anything else you want to discuss, like with the film? Anything else that stood out to you? Um,
Not necessarily. That was like the biggest thing to me. Like her dad was very frustrating to me.
yeah,
So,
I mean, I think it was frustrating for the people in his family too,
oh yeah, in his
Mhm.
community.
In his
Yeah, he was like a
community.
dead weight just on a log.
Hmm. I mean, I think his intentions were pure. They always are pure, but how you express that, how that comes out, is always you got to check that, you know.
Hmm.
And I don't think he should have allowed that to get in the way of what his parenting with Mina because I feel like he wanted this like Ugandan dream so bad that he just rejected any new possibility for Mina's life too, you know?
Yeah. And he was willing to risk that again at 24 years old,
Exactly. I'm like,
just for
why
his own
would
fulfillment.
exactly? It's sort of
And his
selfish
wife,
actually.
because his wife had like built I think a liquor store or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
she was
come on,
definitely one
dude.
of yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he seems very selfish, in my personal opinion.
And like one track minded.
Hmm. And he is the center of that track.
Yeah. I think he didn't take account for the happiness that his wife and Mina had and were trying to build in a new place. I felt like he was like, my is only tied to being in Uganda. So if
Yeah,
I'm happy, you all will be happy behind me. And that's not
exactly.
necessarily the truth.
Yep, exactly.
That, friends, is what patriarchy looks like. So, yeah.
I think that's also
Um,
like I think Mina's attraction to Demetrius too is that his um his want for happiness was more than um
pain and sorrow. He did a lot of sacrificing of his own wants and dreams for other people. And Mina was like, I think Mina has that in common with Demetrius, because obviously she didn't have the option like Demetrius had, but she had to put a lot of her stuff on hold for her father's wants and dreams. And so that is a connection point between them.
What do we think about them running away? You know how they run away to Biloxi, Mississippi? Which I had to look up where Biloxi was, because I always thought that was inland, but it's actually on a beach. Like Biloxi, Mississippi is in like the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, and that's why that scene where they're like run away to the beach, they're in Biloxi. So, what do you think about them running away? I kind of thought they would run away forever.
One more time?
I kind of thought they would run away forever.
Well, they did eventually at the end. I think it was like kind of like foreshadowing. It was like when they did that, it was doing it to have a moment of just like self-gratification kind of thing, right? I guess with each other. Have a good time, right? However, it becomes something that it maybe should not have become. And it was just kind of like, what are you willing to risk to have this relationship? What are you willing to risk to have happiness? What is the price that you will pay, right? And at the end, they ended up just leaving their families to be with one another. So there is, in any relationship that you're in, there's a level of sacrificing that you have to do. Obviously, they sacrifice going to jail. Not everybody's willing to sacrifice that. But in the end, they were willing to just cut the ties with their family to be with one another and nourish that relationship. So, a little foreshadowy.
Yeah. I think
I didn't really see a problem with it. They're grown, so.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess, again, back to what I was saying about the uncle vibe, I was always like, why are you running away with this dude? But, I mean,
I think they just could have picked a better actor.
Well, they could have picked a younger bodied actor. Not that I mean, Denzel's a fabulous actor. He did his job. 100%. He did a great job in it. I just think it would have felt a little more Romeo Juliet, I guess, to me. A little more youthful if they had somebody like a Tupac's age in there.
Yeah. I think it also would have been just a better look. Not saying that Daniel is, and I hate to say that because Denzel is amazing. You know what I mean? He looks amazing. But as far as like the fit of the relationship.
Yeah. And it's because Mina's so much younger. Over 10 years younger. Almost 14 years younger than, right?
Than him.
Than him.
Well, I don't know how old the real actor is, but.
I think she was in her early 20s at the time. I don't even know if she was actually 24. She was probably like 22.
I think, maybe. She looks really young, so.
Yeah, and that's what made it, even their like sex scene, I was like a little cringe because it just felt like it didn't feel as appropriate.
Really? Okay.
You know what I mean? It just felt like Uncle to me.
Yeah, I guess
and
that's
the way
fair.
Denzel was kind of like, like speaking to her through like that process just felt, he always felt a little more like Uncle, like I'm older, I've lived longer, sort of.
See, I saw that as like he was attentive.
What do you say?
I saw it as like he was just being attentive.
I think it was partly attentive, but also partly Uncle, like partly I'm older, I know what I'm doing.
No, because I mean, it's just like a child, right? You like, I hate to say child because you just proved my point. Anyways, not like a child, but like, especially when you're like, I think though, like, especially those moments when it's like somebody new that you're like sleeping with, it's important to be like, I wouldn't say walk them through the process, but like, kind of like,
yes, I know you should be actively discussing these things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how I saw that, just because like, me personally, if I'm having a relationship like that with somebody new, like this is not about to be like a wham bam thank you ma'am, you know what I mean? Like that's just not like, no. So
yeah, I mean, okay, yes, I agree. I think on some level, yes, it was the newness of it. So I think that's how they got away with that
I don't.
representation.
That's not a getaway.
Not get away, but that's how it can be read. But I guess again, it's the older thing for me
I guess one
that
of it.
makes it feel a little uncle,
A little awkward.
a little like, why is Uncle doing these things?
Hmm.
That's what I'm
So, what do you
saying.
think were some like impactful scenes?
Um, I think, and actually, an impactful scene is the scene where Mina's mom, way early in the movie, Mina's mom is taken out of the bus by the Ugandan, by Idi Amin's like
Mm,
army, and they like almost, they don't strip search her, but they like search her. I
yeah,
thought that was an impactful scene because it was so like demeaning. I think it really gets at how harsh and invasive that coup, that government takeover really was,
yeah,
and how aggressive and militaristic it was. And I think that really, you know, that really pulled at my heartstrings because you see her kind of, she's like afraid of that they're going to kill her, in that
yeah,
moment.
yeah, and
So that
especially like in
was
front of her
impactful for
child.
me. Yeah, I think that was a really, really smart way of showing how aggressive
They
the
were.
uh the takeover was,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
without obviously showing big, massive fights and like combat. Show
Hmm.
something really personal and impactful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
But yeah, what
that was
about
a good
you?
scene. Mine was the calling in the rain at the payphone to tell the
Mhm.
families they were leaving because it the idea of rain symbolizing like getting rid of the old and bringing in the new. It was just like a new start for them. They're starting over in this
Mhm.
new space with each other, kind of thing, and they're going to live like their life, their purpose, however they see fit, not living for anyone else. Because Demetrius was kind of living under the shadow of his, well, not under the shadow, but kind of living for his dad and taking care of things that his dad couldn't necessarily take care of him anymore. And Mina living for her parents because they had this idea of what her life should look like, right? And so that's like very liberating to be able to live for yourself and what your hopes and dreams are and not live for somebody else. Because I know a lot of parents that want things to go how they want it to go or look how they want it to look. So you have to do what they tell you to do, which is not living at all. So,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that was a really impactful scene and a really subtle way to end that kind of, or to usher in the new life that Mina and Demetrius were going to go live. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm glad they included that in there because sometimes when people just do like a rain scene, it feels very cliche, like,
Yeah.
But I think in this instance, it made sense,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the subtle impact that that moment needed.
Mm-hmm. I think also too, there's this idea of that, like, if you go back, you'll be like pulled back in. You know what I mean? Like while I'm out, into like a neutral territory, like I'm free, I'm clear minded, I am, I'm no longer worried about anyone else. So they have that level of freedom just by going to that payphone and calling that they would not have back home. Like Mina's mom was trying to pull her back home to be like, hey, come home, and we can talk about this, which meant that she would never leave. You know what I mean? She would always be living under her parents' wills and wishes. Versus Demetrius' dad was like, do your thing, bro. Go do it.
Like,
You lived for me enough. And your brother will have to figure out some things. He'll probably be better off without you. So,
yeah. I wonder if there's a difference in how they see this based off of gender. Like, they're more concerned about their daughter going out into the world like that,
mhm.
and less concerned about their male child going out into the world. You know what I mean?
I I think it was more of I think Mina's parents came from more of a sense of you're going out with Demetrius
Yeah.
than anything. I don't think it was because if Mina was like, I want to go, do something by myself, I think they would have been more inclined because they gave her the freedom to do a lot of things that she wanted to do by herself.
Yeah.
It was just like because she was going with that particular guy.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Now, okay, as we wrap up the episode, what do you think? What do you think happened to Mina and Demetrius after they left Mississippi?
Well, they discussed like doing the carpet cleaning business, so I would assume they did that to live and get by. But I would love to say that they traveled. They always talked about that during their chats and stuff like that about going here, there, other way, everywhere. So I would like to think that they are traveling, seeing the world, exploring the world, and doing what truly makes them happy because they have sacrificed so much of their lives doing things for other people. So I would hope that they're doing those things that make them happy, um, like traveling, which they discussed. So
Yeah, I think they ended up in California.
really,
Yeah, I think they
why?
just drove to California because, like, why not? They got the van. They're in Mississippi, a couple states away.
Mississippi is not a couple states from California. That's a long way.
I drove to Mississippi, so I know how many. I know
Oh, that's
exactly
like
how
at
many
least
states.
5 or 6 states.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, it's less states than South Carolina,
Yes.
but I don't know. I think they ended up somewhere, set up a family. They're still together, got 2 kids in college now.
And a
You
white
know,
picket fence.
yeah. I really do think they had a happy ever after. I don't always
Oh,
think that
100%.
in movies, but I think they had a happy ever after.
Yeah, I think so too.
Either that or Mina started her hot girl phase immediately after.
No. I feel like that was a thing back then, but
Yeah, not quite, not the same way now, but yeah, that's what I think. I don't think they had children right away though.
no, I think they lived their best life first,
Yeah,
as they should. Wait.
I don't think they ended up in LA, but I do think they ended up in California.
I feel like they traveled, honestly. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they like went to a different country and like lived like Mexico.
Yeah, that's true too. You're right. They could have done that.
Yeah.
They were open.
Yeah, very.
Hmm.
Pretty adventurous. Well, especially, but
They're like, we're gonna do what works for us.
exactly. And now I'm here for that, like, as you should, seriously.
Yeah, absolutely, you gotta do what works for you, man. Yeah,
Moral of the movie: don't let your parents run your life.
seriously. In 1992 or 2022.
Exactly.
So wait, how many years ago that was that? 30 years then? That
That
when
was
that film
30
was made?
years. So 92, 02,
2012,
12, 20. Yep,
26 to 30 years.
30 years.
We're getting old.
Jesus.
Nah, 40 is the new 30.
Honey, I'm 22. I will always be.
Exactly. All right, well, that was our discussion on Mississippi Masala. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We hope you, if you watched the film before, we hope you found some of the same themes that we found, or found some of the same, talking points that we found. And if you haven't, we hope that that this podcast encourages you to watch the film and see what you can pick up and see the kind of the lens you can watch this film through.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.